In the wind-beaten harbor of Black Reef, a newlywed couple, Elise and Morgan Hart, was about to uncover the truth behind the town's most whispered curse. What started as a romantic escape to restore a deserted lighthouse took a shocking turn when they came face to face with a secret the sea itself had tried to bury. Elise Hart wasn't your typical marine biologist. For over a decade, she had devoted her life to studying deep-sea anomalies, known among her peers for her fearless curiosity and a gift for decoding sonar patterns others dismissed as static. Then, she and Morgan discovered the sealed hatch beneath the lighthouse. They had no idea they were walking into the remnants of a Cold War surveillance vault built to monitor something not human. Elise's decision to unseal the corroded door would ignite a chain of events that blurred the line between science and nightmare, drawing the attention of forces both earthly and ancient. What began as a simple home restoration would become a reckoning with something the ocean never meant to be found. And before it was over, the quiet town of Black Reef and everyone who ever sailed its waters would never sleep soundly again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sea looked like hammered iron when the ferry nosed past the last buoy, and the lighthouse rose out of the fog like a bone the ocean refused to swallow. Elise Hart stood with both hands on the gunwale, salt needling her cheeks, cataloguing details like she always did. The height of the tower, the missing panes near the lantern room, the odd way seabirds circled once and then sheared off as if they'd hit an invisible fence. Morgan filmed her from the bow, grinning under his hood. Day 1, the Harts and their happily ever after haunted lighthouse, he said, pitching his voice into that warm, documentary cadence viewers loved. The camera lens breathed, fogging and clearing, as though it too were deciding if this was a good idea. Captain Reggie Morrow cut the engine and let the swell carry them the last 30 feet to the rusted ladder bolted into the island's rock. You take what she gives you, or she takes what you got left, he muttered, more to the water than to them. His beard was the color of driftwood, his eyes polished stones. He'd taken their money with the embarrassed reluctance of a man accepting payment to point at a cliff and say, "Jump." "We're good jumpers," Morgan said lightly, and Elise elbowed him because she could hear the tremor beneath the joke. Up close, the lighthouse wore its sentry like a scabbed-over wound. The door had a municipal seal half-stripped by weather. Town of Black Reef, condemned, do not enter, 1968. Elise fitted the key they'd been given for a property no one wanted and felt the bolt grind like a creature clearing its throat. The smell came first. Not rot, not exactly. Cold iron, old paper, a whisper of machine oil. The hush inside was so complete it made her ears ring. They set their boxes on the cracked tile, and Morgan kept filming, panning across the circular room. "Our charming fixer-upper," he narrated. Original stonework, vintage lead paint, and ominous municipal abandonment notices. The camera stuttered. On the screen, the lighthouse interior warped for a breath's length, the curve of the wall bending in like a ribcage under pressure, then snapping back. Morgan lowered the camera and blinked at the room, then at the playback. "Weird compression," he said, but his voice had lost its swagger. He looked up at the spiral stairs. "We'll call it character." They climbed. Each step hummed with the island's wind, the metal humming in Elise's bones. At the watchroom, the glass gave them a horizon scabbed with black reefs, gulls drawn small as ash flakes by distance. Elise put her palm on the brass rail and pictured the keepers who had stood here, counting lights on the water, convinced they were responsible for every life that threaded those dark lanes. Somewhere below the stone, waves boomed in a rhythm that wasn't wave-like at all. Reggie carried up a crate and set it beside the door with a grunt. "Don't stay after dark on a full moon," he said, wiping his hands on his coat. "Signals carry farther. And calls too." He eyed the lantern room as if expecting someone to lean from the shadows. "The island remembers," Morgan smiled. "We left city rent for folk wisdom." "Worth every penny?" Reggie didn't smile back. "Worth $1. he said, and tapped the doorframe as if it were a headstone. "You hear anything you think is a person after midnight?" "It ain't." Elise found the radio under a canvas dropcloth in a storage alcove, a 1960s rack unit with knobs like knuckles and dust thick as felt. Someone had taped a paper label over the dial, "Deep Echo O." She brushed the dust aside, and the radio answered with a thin spine of static that rose and fell like breath. No power, she thought, and then saw the frayed cord go nowhere. The plug snapped off years ago. "It shouldn't be doing that," she said out loud, which was her way of confessing she was delighted. Batteries hidden somewhere. Morgan asked, already angling his camera. The viewfinder jittered again, then stabilized. He frowned. "I swear I saw—" He stopped. On the tiny screen, a smear of darker dark sat briefly in the corner of the room, like a person trying not to be seen. He rewound. The smear was gone. The room was only a room. His laugh clipped off. "Okay, bonus footage of dust," they unpacked. Elise counted new starts as blessings. 2 enamel mugs, a coffee press with a cracked handle, the notebook she used to organize questions until they behaved. Outside, the afternoon softened from pewter to lead. Wind recorded itself on the lighthouse skin. Morgan kept catching the lens fog, where there wasn't any, small pulsings of blur. "Maybe it's the magnetics." He made it into a joke because that's what he knew how to do. "Our house is a giant fridge and we're the souvenirs." Dusk came quick. Reggie loaded his empty crate and hesitated on the threshold. "Full moon in 2 nights, he said. "You'll want to be on the mainland." Elise opened her mouth to tell him they'd be fine, that fear was a kind of weather you could dress for. But his hand, rough from rope, found the radio and he turned the volume knob a fraction. The static narrowed to a tone almost too low to hear, a subterranean vowel. He flinched, let go, and the tone died. "She's breathing," he said. "Whether you hear it or not." When he was gone, the sea sounded wider. Elise and Morgan ate cold beans standing up and christened the floor with spilled coffee. They toasted the foolishness of love. They dared the stairwell to creak back. They filmed each other laughing until the camera took a breath and didn't give it back for 3 seconds. The frame freezing on Elise's smile so she looked like a still of a missing person on the evening news. They unrolled their mattress between the watchroom and the lantern ladder because somehow higher felt safer. The radio whispered to itself, a rusted animal in a dream. Wind flexed the glass. The lighthouse settled like an old ship at anchor. Around midnight, the silence broke. Not the wind, not stone shifting. A sound lower than sight, climbing up through the basalt like a cold hand through a sleeve. It held for a count of 5, paused, then came again, a few hertz higher, as if the island were receiving, something only the bones could parse. Elise reached for Morgan's hand and found it. "Do you hear that?" He squeezed. "It's nothing," he said, staring at the floorboards, eyes bright as black water. "It's just the sea," but outside the lantern glass, the birds were gone, and the reef answered in pulses that did not feel like waves at all. Morning came dim and slow. The light fractured through fog like glass underwater. Elise woke first, listening to the faint hum that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. Morgan was still asleep, camera beside him, its red recording light blinking, though she was sure it had been off when they lay down. She slipped from the blankets and walked the spiral stair to the lower rooms, notebook in hand. Every surface of the lighthouse was damp, as if it exhaled sea air. When she reached the bedroom, her bare foot struck something hollow beneath the floorboards. She crouched, pressed an ear to the plank, and heard a brittle echo, the sound of paper shifting where no air should move. She fetched a screwdriver, pried the board up, and found a space just wide enough for a book wrapped in oilcloth. The journal's cover bore a salt-warped name, Calvin Rudd. The pages smelled of mildew and ink, the handwriting steady at first, then unraveling into jagged strokes. March 3rd, 1958, the sound is louder again. Not in the ears, but in the bones. They said to keep recording, that the source is deep, too deep. The fish vanish when the tone begins. I dream of wires in the sea, Further entries dissolved into fragmented sketches, a spiral symbol carved into a wall, a line of coordinates, then the last page, where the writing veered diagonally across the paper. It's under us. It wants to be heard. Elise closed the journal and set it on the table, heart knocking hard. When Morgan came down, still half asleep, she tried to make her voice light. Found some local color for your documentary. He rubbed his eyes. A love letter from the last guy who lost his mind? Something like that. She flipped to the coordinates. He mentions low-frequency sounds, maybe geological. Could be resonance through the basalt. Morgan powered up his camera. Or ghosts, if we're lucky. The word hung between them. Ghosts. Elise wasn't sure which idea frightened her more, superstition or data. That afternoon, fog rolled back far enough to show the reef's jagged black teeth in the surf. The lighthouse shadow fell long over the rocks, marking where the island stone met an older, darker seam. Morgan set up his tripod to film the horizon, while Elise returned to the lower level. She traced the journal's sketch against the wall by memory, running her fingers over the stone until she found the faint outline of a metal seam, a circle, waist-high, like the lid of a vault welded shut. When Morgan joined her, she tapped the outline. This matches Rudd's drawing. He leaned close, camera light sweeping over corrosion and sealant. A hatch. Why would a lighthouse need one? Maintenance access, maybe, she said, though her voice faltered. Or something added later. Morgan's camera flickered. The battery indicator drained from full to empty in seconds. Static laced the viewfinder. He cursed, turned it off. Something's messing with the electronics again. Magnetic interference. He shook his head. Feels more like intention. That night the wind rose until the tower swayed faintly, like a ship at anchor. Elise lay awake listening. The sound beneath the island returned, deep, deliberate, spaced like breathing. At first, she told herself it was waves battering the cliff base. Then the rhythm changed. 2 slow pulses, pause, 1 long. The same pattern Calvin Rudd had drawn beside the coordinates. She sat up, heart hammering. "Morgan," she whispered. He stirred, groggy. "What?" "Listen," he frowned, half asleep, then went still. The sound rolled up through the floorboards, low enough to blur hearing into feeling. He grabbed the camera instinctively, pressed record, though the lens fogged instantly. The red light flickered in time with the sound. On, off, on. "Okay. That's not wind," he said. From somewhere below, metal groaned, the sealed hatch complaining against the pressure of years. They stayed like that for hours, listening, too afraid to move and too enthralled to stop. By dawn, the noise ceased. The lighthouse was silent again, except for the soft drip of condensation from the ceiling. Elise opened her notebook and drew the pattern she'd heard, matching it against Rudd's notes. The lines overlapped perfectly. When they stepped outside for air, Captain Reggie's boat bobbed at the small dock. He climbed the ladder with a face like someone delivering bad weather. "Told you not to stay through the night." Elise showed him the journal. "Do you know this man?" Reggie's jaw set. "Knew him? Found his gear half a mile up the cliffs." "Never found him." He looked toward the tower. "If you found what he left, leave it be. That hatch was sealed for a reason." Morgan lifted his camera. "What reason?" The fisherman's gaze turned to the sea. "Because the thing that lives under Black Reef doesn't like to be filmed." When he left, the air felt heavier, as though the island itself was listening. Elise and Morgan stood over the floor seam one last time before heading upstairs. The metal beneath their feet pulsed faintly once, like the heartbeat of something waking. Rain lashed the glass like claws that night. The wind howled through the lighthouse vents, turning every crevice into a throat. Elise and Morgan worked by the beam of a single lantern, tools scattered at their feet. The hatch waited in the basement floor, its metal halo slick with condensation, bolts corroded to the color of dried blood. They'd argued for an hour about opening it. Morgan wanted footage. Elise wanted data. Veer wanted both of them gone. "Once we see what's under there," Morgan said, voice steady but tight, "we'll know if this place is haunted or just crazy." Elise swallowed. "If it's sealed for a reason." "Yeah, probably the same reason the government dumped it on us for $1. He pried the first bolt loose." The sound echoed up the stairwell, iron screaming against age. Elise's light flickered. A gust pushed down through the tower like breath. When the final bolt dropped, the hatch lid shifted half an inch, exhaling a rush of cold air that smelled of ozone and machine dust. Morgan trained the camera on the seam as Elise forced the hatch open. Beneath lay a stairwell spiraling into blackness. Moist air breathed upward. Somewhere far below, machinery stirred, faint as a heartbeat. They descended slowly, the light-painting walls of concrete and rusted conduit. A sign near the bottom read, "Department of Naval Acoustics, Project Deep Echo, authorized personnel only." The chamber beyond was a bunker frozen in time. Computers the size of coffins lined the walls. Reels of magnetic tape still threaded through corroded decks. A desk lay overturned beside a coffee mug, fossilized in dust. And in the center stood a circular vault door embossed with a simple engraving, Deep Echo. Elise brushed the letters, her breath fogging. "Is a listening post. For what?" Morgan asked. The tape reels answered with a soft click, unprompted, spooling to life. Elise jumped back. "It's not plugged in," the speakers crackled. A voice came through, thin, recorded decades ago. Log 6221. Subject frequency repeating at 32-second intervals. Source unknown. Crew reporting headaches and sleep disruption. Recommend temporary evacuation. Then came another sound layered beneath it, a distortion too deep for language. A moan stretched across pitch and distance, rising until the light bulbs trembled. Morgan's camera shook in his hands. Did it just say your name?" Elise froze. The sound replayed, warped but unmistakable. "Elise." Her name dragged through static and water. She backed away, heart hammering. "Turn it off." Morgan slapped switches, yanked cords. The power was dead, but the voice lingered, a vibration more than a sound. Then abruptly silence. They stared at each other. Morgan's nose was bleeding. Elise's lantern dimmed to a coal red pulse. In a far corner, she noticed a notebook, leather, stamped with the seal of the Naval Acoustics Division. The name on the cover read, Agent K. Adebayo. She opened it to a diagram of the trench under Black Reef. Lines of sonar waves bending toward a central void labeled Non-Human Source, Active. Morgan lowered the camera, voice shaking. "We need to go." Elise's gaze locked on the vault door. Something pressed from the other side, one heavy thud like a hand testing the metal. The air grew colder. "Go where?" she whispered. "We're already inside it." As they backed up the stairs, the radio upstairs clicked on by itself, spitting the same frequency from the journal. The lighthouse pulsed once, as if remembering how to breathe, and below, behind the vault, something ancient began to stir. Sleep came in fragments after that night, thin slices between the sound of surf and the whisper of circuits reawakening below. Elise dreamed she was underwater, drifting through blackness threaded with silver light. Something vast moved beneath her, unseen but aware, humming in tones that vibrated her ribs. When she reached for the light, it opened an eye. She woke, choking on air. The walls were sweating. Morgan sat at the desk, headphones clamped over his ears, transfixed by a reel-to-reel spinning, though no power reached it. "Morgan?" she rasped. He looked up slowly. "It's talking to me." His pupils were blown wide, voice reverent. "It's not random noise, it's language." A pattern of threes. Elise tore the headphones off him. The reel hissed, whispering her name again, distorted, layered with ocean static. She shut it off, unplugged the machine. It still spun for several seconds before grinding to a stop. That afternoon, Reggie's boat appeared through the fog, like a ghost. He climbed the rocks without a word, hat-dripping rain. His eyes darted toward the tower. "You opened it," Elise nodded. "There's a bunker, recordings, something alive down there." Reggie's jaw trembled. "My boy said the same before he walked into the sea." He pressed a pendant into her hand, a tarnished brass compass that no longer pointed north. "If it starts to sing, leave. Don't answer. It remembers voices." That night, thunder rolled over the island. The deep echo console flickered to life, dials twitching on their own. Morgan's camera recorded without him touching it, capturing frames of the stairwell empty, then not. A shape glistened at the bottom step, something that shimmered like water standing upright. Elise shut the hatch. The sound that followed was not the ocean. It was knocking. From below, the storm broke at dawn, leaving the sea bruised and still. Elise stood on the balcony, the compass Reggie had given her spinning uselessly in her palm. Morgan hadn't slept. He paced the watchroom, filming through the shattered panes, though there was nothing to see but fog. His face looked thinner, his eyes glassy, voice lower, quieter. "She's calling again," he whispered. "She?" Elise asked. "The one below." "You heard her last night." Elise bit down on the panic rising in her throat. "You need rest, Morgan. You're hearing interference, cross frequencies." He smiled, slow and unfamiliar. "It's not interference if she's answering." By mid-afternoon, a small motorboat appeared through the haze. A woman disembarked, trim in a grey raincoat, her badge flashing only long enough for Elise to read the words, "Historical Research Division." "Dr. Lena Adebayo," she introduced herself. Voice crisp, accent clipped London by way of Lagos. "I've been looking for you." Elise's stomach dropped. "Adebayo?" The woman nodded. "Kwame Adebayo was my father. I believe you found his journal." Inside, Lena examined the bunker with professional detachment, but her hands trembled when she touched the deep echo vault. "This station was never meant for light keeping," she said. "It was an acoustic observation site. They picked up something in the trench in 1963, a signal, non-human." Morgan filmed her, muttering to himself. "So we woke it." Lena's eyes flicked toward him. "You reactivated the array when you powered your equipment. The signal works both ways. It listens when you listen." Outside, thunder rolled again, though the sky was clear. That night, the power surged. Lights strobed. Elise ran downstairs and found the sub-basement half-flooded, salt water seeping up through cracks that hadn't existed yesterday. The sonar console blinked in rhythmic intervals, long, short, long, an imitation of heartbeat or Morse code. "Morgan," she called. The only reply was the echo of his voice through the speaker, recorded hours earlier, but answering perfectly in time. "I'm here." She followed the sound to the flooded stairwell. Her flashlight beam found him waist-deep in water, facing the dark, whispering in a language that didn't exist. "Morgan!" she screamed. He turned slowly, his eyes reflecting the sonar's pulse. "It wants the surface," he said. "And it remembers your name." The water trembled. From deep below came a sound that wasn't thunder. It was breath. They dragged Morgan from the flooded stairwell, with Lena bracing his shoulders and Elise gripping his wrists until the tendons creaked. He fought them without quite seeming to know it, mouth moving around syllables that slipped like fish through his teeth. They heaved him onto the concrete landing outside the hatch, slammed the metal door, and spun the wheel until the seal kissed home. The knocking stopped. The absence of sound rang. Morgan's eyes tracked invisible constellations on the ceiling. "No surface," he whispered in that not-quite voice. "No sky. Down, down." Lena knelt, her raincoat black with salt water, her breath white in the cold air. "He's in auditory entrainment," she said, clinical to keep her hands from shaking. "The pattern got into his head." "It's not just sound," Elise said. "It's meaning. It maps to speech rhythms, but not ours." She tore a strip from a towel and tied Morgan's wrists to a pipe, hating herself for the efficiency of it. He didn't fight the knot, only hummed something that was too low to be human. They moved him upstairs to the keeper's room, away from the wet echo of the sub-basement. Elise wedged the door with a chair and sat on the floor with her back against the wood. If he woke disoriented and slammed into it, he'd feel her there. He dozed. When he dreamed, he whispered, and the whisper made the glass quiver. Lena found coffee and boiled it on a hot plate that groaned each time the power sagged. They drank it standing up. "My father used to talk in his sleep," she said quietly, eyes on nothing. "After Black Reef, he'd stop mid-sentence at dinner and say a string of numbers like he was taking dictation. We moved flats 3 times. The signal followed us." Elise rubbed her eyes. "Why come back? Why help us?" "Because I've already lost my father to it," Lena said. And I refuse to live losing him forever because I let someone else suffer alone." Elise looked at the door, separating her from her husband, and swallowed a knot. "He followed it into the water," she said, not sure whether the words counted as confession or accusation. "He heard it the way I heard it. We woke it. We woke it by listening," Lena said, and there was something like wonder under the dread, a scientist's awe peeking through grief. "It's reciprocal. It adapts to any system that hears it, ears, microphones, tape heads, lenses. It learns your shape by the echo you make." They returned to the bunker at first light. Their boots made brittle sounds. Salt water seeped from the cracks again, inches deeper than last night. The vault door sweated cold. Elise set a stack of journals and reels on the central table and began assembling a map. Calvin Rudd's neat entries became frightened scratches. Agent Adebayo's precise diagrams curved toward a blank labeled void. She laid the pages side by side until the margins touched, like fitting bones back into a skeleton. "Listen to this," she said. Threading a reel labeled 6 to 27. She cranked the manual wheel because the power wouldn't stay steady. The tape hissed and then resolved into a man's voice, Lena's father, younger by decades, and carrying the calm of someone who had practiced sounding calm. Deep Echo Log 627. Cross-correlation confirms non-geological source. Low-frequency carrier modulated by narrow-band structure. Not random. Requesting clearance for Theta. Elise stopped the reel. "Theta!" Lena's eyes closed, as if she were hearing a prayer. "Failsafe Theta," she said. "He wrote about it in letters I wasn't supposed to read. A terminal protocol. A last resort. He never told me what it was, only that he wasn't sure he could do it when the time came." Elise stared at the vault. Her breath fogged into tiny ghosts. Where? Lena scanned the bunker walls, then moved to the rear filing cabinets, yanking drawers, paper whispering like surf. "He said it was physical, locked, biometric. He used to press his thumb into my palm and say, 'Pressure makes the door remember you.'" She sank to her knees and felt in the dark under the lowest drawer until her fingers found a hidden latch. The cabinet popped forward an inch with a tired sigh. Behind it, a recessed panel glimmered with a thin film of frost. The steel plate carried a faded, stenciled legend. "Failsafe Theta, authorized 2-part activation, catastrophe only." Elise pressed her hand to the metal. It felt like winter. 2-part, she said. 2 people, Lena swallowed. Redundant moral locks. No one should be able to end a world alone. Elise looked up at the ceiling, tracing the lighthouse's spine, imagining the stone's history layered like sediment, keepers' boots, knives sharpening on thresholds, storms. "If Theta collapses the trench," she said slowly, testing each word as if it might break in her mouth, "it will take the island." "Maybe more," Lena nodded once, mechanical. The notes implied controlled implosion. Sonic amplification coupled to buried charges placed during the retrofits. It would seal whatever cavity connects to the anomaly. Theoretically. Theoretically, Elise echoed, and thought of Morgan listing in the water, eyes gone to the pulse. She forced air in. "We need to know what triggers it, and what it costs." They combed through the paper caches, soft as leaves, the words in them fossils under a microscope. In the margin of a memo stamped classified, Elise found a sketch of a key cylinder paired with a fingerprint. In a separate folder, under maintenance logs, a schematic of the island showed tunnels like veins and charges represented as small triangles embedded in basalt. "We can do it," she said. "The way a person tries on a garment they aren't sure they can afford. We can close it." "And Morgan?" Lena asked. Elise's mouth went dry. "If we don't close it, it takes him anyway." "It takes more." She closed her eyes. The image came unbidden. Reggie's compass spinning, the birds retreating, the red light on the camera blinking in time with a heart that wasn't human. She opened her eyes and found Lena watching her with a pity that didn't condescend. "Let me check on him," Lena said. "You keep reading." Upstairs, the sky was the color of bruise fading to yellow. The sea had calmed enough to be deceptive. Reggie Morrow's boat wasn't on the horizon. Elise tried to tell herself that meant he was wise, not gone. She kept reading. Agent Adebayo had written in a steady block script that captured no panic even when panic bled through. Theta requires 2 live operators, synchronized biometric confirmation, and continuous manual engagement for the duration of the sequence. Warning, the subject responds to energy. Theta will attract. Expect interpersonal interference. Interpersonal interference. Elise's stomach turned. She heard a thud upstairs, then Lena's voice low, then a harsh scrape. She grabbed the nearest thing that felt like a weapon, an iron pry bar, and ran. In the keeper's room, the chair wedge lay splintered. Morgan stood a foot from the window, the knot from the pipe trailing like a dead snake from his wrist. His pupils swallowed color. He was whispering the shape of her name without consonants. Lena stood between him and the door, hands up. Morgan, it's Lena. Let's sit. Let's talk. He turned his head slowly, as if the bones didn't belong to him. She's down there, he said. She's rising. If we open the door, she won't knock anymore. Elise kept the pry bar low. Look at me, Hawk. She used the nickname she hadn't used in months. See me. For a second, one thin, miraculous second, his face returned to itself. He blinked, watery. Ellie, he said like a man spotting land. It's loud. It's so loud. Tears, sudden and hot. I tried to keep it out. It learned the path. She stepped closer. The pry bar cooled the sweat of her palm. I know, love. She glanced at Lena. Help me. Together they guided him to the bed, retied the knot loosely, not to imprison, but to anchor. He didn't resist. He went pliant the way the sea goes pliant before it pulls. Lena's phone buzzed with no signal, screen erratic for a second, then dead. Somewhere in the tower, the radio coughed a low tone and held it. A shadow filled the doorway. Reggie Morrow stood there, hat limp in his hands, face salt-burned and grave. I figured, he said, breath rough, if you were fools enough to open a door, you'd be fool enough to stand in the threshold when the tide came. Town said not to come back. I've never been much for doing what I'm told, Elise laughed, short and broken. We found a failsafe. Reggie shut the door behind him, set the hat on the desk, and leaned his hip against the wall, as if bracing himself against memory. Aye, they told us that word once. Said it like it was a prayer. But it's a grave. The tower wasn't meant to save ships. It was meant to make sure they didn't come near. He nodded toward the floor. There were days we saw lights out past the reef, heard the horn of some captain who didn't know. We kept the lamp dark and let him think the weather was at fault. Better to lose a hull than open a mouth. Elise found herself standing straighter. If we start Theta, she said, it may take the island. Reggie looked out the window at the flat bruise of sea. His hands shook just enough to make the brass compass in his pocket click. Then it takes the island. The world's full of islands. There's just the one ocean. He met her eyes. I couldn't take my boy back. But I can hand you a match if you're set on burning what took him. The building creaked, the sound pitched lower than weather. The sonar array below ticked, clicked, ticked, settling into a rhythm like an engine catching. The smell of ozone sharpened, as if a storm had coiled itself under the floor. Elise turned to Lena. We do it. Lena's jaw flexed. She nodded, not like a soldier, but like a daughter. 2 keys, she said. 2 pulses. She looked at Morgan, whose eyes were closed and whose lips moved, as if reciting a prayer in a language older than prayer. He'll try to stop us. He won't, Reggie said, rough certainty like a rope. Not him, Elise kissed Morgan's forehead. I love you, she said into his skin so the words might sink where the other sound couldn't. If you can hear me, hold on. If you can't, forgive me. His eyelids fluttered like wings struck by rain. Down in the bunker, the panel for Theta accepted Lena's fingerprint with a reluctant chirp, then bathed Elise's in a bloodless blue. 2 green circles ghosted into being on the metal. The vault beyond hummed, the pitch climbing. A speaker somewhere deep in the concrete whispered a single low syllable that could have been her name or the ocean itself, speaking for the first time. The manual described a sequence like a dance. Turn, press, hold, count. If either hand left the panel before the cycle completed, the system would fail gracefully and lock for an hour. If they kept pressure, the sequence would build and then pass a point of no return. Once we cross the midpoint, Lena said, reading aloud to keep her voice steady, we cannot abort without catastrophic resonance in the wrong place. Say it straight, Reggie said. Once we start, we have to finish or we make it mad. Elise flexed her fingers. On my count, she said. 3, 2, 1. They pressed. Above them, the lighthouse shivered. The lamps in the watchroom flared and then steadied at a dim corpse-light glow. The audio racks that should have been dead stuttered awake, needles rising. The floor trembled with a bass so deep it felt like gravity considering an alternate career. Halfway through the sequence, Morgan's voice came from the stairwell, hollow and near. "Ellie," he called, and the single syllable was both him and not him. Reggie moved to the doorway and planted his boots. He didn't touch Morgan. He just stood there, eyes wet, making the doorway a human reef. "Stay," Reggie said. It wasn't an order. It was a plea tied to a memory only fathers knew. Morgan's footsteps faltered, then resumed, slower. He reached the threshold, and for a heartbeat his face cleared. He looked at Elise's hands pressed to the steel, at Lena's set jaw, at Reggie's open palms. "Do it," he said, and the grief in his smile made Elise bite blood. "Before I change my mind," he surged, then fast, desperate, an undertow becoming wave. Reggie caught him with the clumsy tenderness of a net. The two men stumbled, knocked a chair, crashed into the cabinet that hid the theta panel. Elise didn't lift her hand. Neither did Lena. They kept pressure. They counted. 90 seconds, 80. The pitch rose into teeth-gritting range. Water began to thread up through hairline cracks in the concrete, climbing as if obeying a different moon. The vault door bulged inward a fraction, exhaling a breath like a whale slipping past stone. "Almost," Lena whispered. "Almost." From behind the vault, something answered in a long, low chord that made the screws in the walls sing. The compass in Reggie's pocket spun and then stopped, needle fixed toward the floor. Morgan slackened in his arms and made a small sound, a human sound, the sound of surrender or relief. 60 seconds. The sea answered. Not on the surface, but in the pressure itself. Elise tasted iron and thought of all the names for fear she had learned since childhood, and how none of them were sufficient. 30, Lena said. "Hold!" Elise looked at Morgan. He met her eyes and gave a single slow nod, the kind lovers give at train stations when the train is already moving. She held because there was no other mercy left. Outside, the gulls returned in a ragged spiral and then veered away as if the sky had suddenly become too heavy for wings. The island's bones groaned. Below, in the trench, something vast flexed, deciding whether to rise or to remain story. 10, Lena said through bared teeth. 9, 8, a hairline crack raced across the vault like lightning underwater. 7, 6, 5, Reggie closed his eyes. Morgan whispered a word that might have been Elise's name or might have been forgive. 4, 3, 2, 1. The panel clicked into a tone that didn't belong to any machine Elise knew. The theta sequence latched. The point of no return passed like a swallowed stone. Elise didn't lift her hand. She didn't let go. The air in the chamber trembled like the breath of a dying machine. When Elise and Lena pressed their hands to the activation plates, light bled through the metal in pale rings. The countdown began, its voice steady, merciless. Morgan appeared in the doorway, drenched and hollow-eyed. Water dripped from his sleeves, as though he had risen from the trench itself. "Ellie," he said softly, "it doesn't have to end this way." Elise didn't look up. "It does," she replied, voice tight. "Before it learns the surface." Reggie braced himself against the door, breath wheezing. "Keep your posts," he barked. "I've got him." He stepped forward, catching Morgan's shoulders as the man lunged toward the console. The two collided, the sound like a hammer striking bone. "Morgan, stop!" Elise cried, but his eyes were black mirrors. He shoved Reggie aside, hands finding a panel cable. Sparks flared, amber lights flickering to fault. The entire bunker shook. Lena slammed her palm against the override, shouting through the roar. "Hold it steady!" The console screamed in protest. Elise gritted her teeth, pressing harder. Slowly the system stabilized. Green lights bloomed across the wall again, one by one, deliberate, defiant. Morgan sagged to his knees, smoke curling from his fingertips. For an instant his eyes cleared. "I can hear her," he whispered. "She's afraid." "Then let her sleep," Elise said, tears breaking free. He looked up at her, some small peace in his ruined face. "Finish it," Elise nodded. The lever's final lock slid open with a metallic sigh. Together, she and Lena pulled. The floor split, a tremor racing through the rock as pressure released. The trench roared, a collapsing lung. Water surged upward in a violent bloom. Elise clung to the console, praying it would hold until the end. Morgan smiled once, faint and human, before the light swallowed him. When the echo faded, only the sea's slow breathing remained. The lights dimmed to black. Lena turned to Elise, her voice a whisper. "It's done." Elise closed her eyes, the taste of salt and grief mingling on her lips. "No," she said. "It's sleeping." The silence that followed the implosion was immense, like the world holding its breath. The walls of the bunker groaned, then cracked in surrender. Water hissed through the seams, steam rising where metal met the cold Atlantic air. Elise stumbled to her feet. The control room was half-lit, alarms flickering weakly in red. Lena dragged herself from the floor, one sleeve torn, blood darkening her collar. The lever hung frozen in its final position, vibrating faintly, as if the machine itself was afraid to stop moving. "Is it over?" Elise asked. Lena looked toward the ceiling, where dust drifted like falling ash. "If we're lucky," she said. "If not, this whole island's about to go under." A low rumble confirmed it. Somewhere below, the sea was folding back into the trench, sealing the wound they had torn open. Elise's ears popped. The air pressure shifted again. They ran. The corridors they'd entered hours earlier were now half flooded, walls sweating and splitting. Elise grabbed Lena's wrist, hauling her through waist-deep water. The sound of rushing waves echoed from every direction, inside the walls, beneath the floor, above their heads. When they burst through the final stairwell door, the night outside was gone. The sky was a molten grey, thick with rain and lightning. The lighthouse leaned at an angle, its lantern glass shattered, its beam flickering in spasms. "Boat!" Lena shouted. But there was none. The dock had splintered. The sea clawed at the rocks, dragging everything it could claim. Elise looked back. Through the open hatchway below the cliff, a column of water erupted upward, glowing faintly from within, the last breath of the thing they had buried. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard Morgan's voice inside the roar, a whisper across pressure and distance. "Thank you." The wave hit. It lifted them both off their feet and hurled them into the freezing dark. Salt tore at Elise's throat. Pain and clarity arrived in the same instant. She surfaced once, gasping. Lena's hand caught her collar and pulled. When they washed ashore, the island was gone. Only foam and broken light marked where it had been. The compass Reggie had given her spun once, then stopped, pointing toward open sea. Elise closed her fist around it and whispered, "Sleep well." The horizon answered with thunder. The morning after the collapse arrived without sunlight, only a flat grey dawn crawling over the waves. Elise woke on a bed of kelp and sand, lungs raw from salt. Beside her, Lena coughed seawater, her face pale beneath streaks of soot. The sea behind them was calm now, unnaturally calm, as if it had forgotten it had ever risen up. Black Reef was gone. Nothing remained but the smooth circle of water where the island had stood, a dark mirror with no reflection. Elise stared until her eyes burned, waiting for the lighthouse to reappear, for some proof that it had all been real. There was nothing. Hours later, a fishing trawler found them. Uniformed men met them on the mainland, faces too composed, questions too rehearsed. Elise was wrapped in a thermal blanket and ushered into a van with tinted windows. No one said the word lighthouse. No one asked about Morgan. Inside a grey government office, a man in a suit slid a folder across the table. "For your protection," he said. Non-disclosure relocation medical care. We can help you start over. Lena read through hers silently, then signed without a tremor. Elise stared at the pen until her reflection wavered in its silver barrel. "You're going to pretend it never happened," she said. The man didn't blink. "That's correct." Later that night, in the motel room they were told was temporary, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, watching the rain blur the parking lot lights. "You should take it," she said softly. "Disappear. They'll bury everything anyway." Elise nodded, but her hands shook as she opened the waterproof pouch she'd hidden under her coat. Inside was Morgan's final recording, the one she'd found in his camera before the flood. The timestamp showed it was filmed an hour before he vanished. His voice was calm, the way it had been when they first arrived. "If you're hearing this, Ellie, it means you finished what I couldn't. Don't let them erase it." The video ended with static, then the faint sound of waves. By morning, Lena was gone. No note, no car, just an empty bed. Elise watched the sun rise over the water, clutching the camera to her chest. The sea looked clean again, too clean. She whispered, "Rest now, love." The horizon, silent and still, offered no promise it would stay that way. Part 10. Echoes never die. Years passed, but the sea never stopped whispering. Elise Hart, now calling herself Dr. Ilara Mason, stood before her graduate seminar at the Pacific Maritime Institute. The lecture hall hummed with quiet curiosity. On the projection screen behind her, sonar graphs danced, colorful arcs and fading pulses that marked the unseen geography of the deep. "Every ocean," she told them, "remembers more than we can measure. What you hear as noise is often memory, sound compressed into the shape of time." The students scribbled notes, unknowing. None of them recognized the tremor in her voice when she said memory. None of them knew that 10 years ago, on a jagged reef now missing from every chart, she had heard the sea remember her name. When class ended, the students filed out, leaving behind the ghostly hum of old projectors. Elise turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The sonar maps glowed faintly on the screen, a scatter of frequencies from the Mariana Trench. Data from a recent research expedition she had quietly funded under an assumed grant. She pressed play. For the first 5 minutes, nothing. Then a deep rolling pulse, familiar, impossible. 3 tones, low, low, high, then silence. Then again, low, low, high. Elise's hand froze halfway to her coffee mug. Her breath caught. She increased the playback speed, then slowed it again, analyzing the waveform. No mistake. It was identical to the deep echo logs from the Lighthouse bunker. The same rhythm that had once shaken the floor beneath her and called her by name through the static of dead machines. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. One message. It didn't die, it moved. Well, the air left her lungs in a single gasp. Lena Adebayo. After the Black Reef collapse, Lena had vanished into rumor dead, or absorbed back into the same agency that had buried the truth. Elise had searched for her for years, through leaks and declassified files, but found nothing. Until now, attached to the message was a set of coordinates, 11 to 21N. 42 to 12E, just above the Mariana Trench. She stared at them until the numbers burned behind her eyelids. Outside, rain battered the windows, rhythmic, relentless, like knocking from below. That night, Elise returned to her small coastal apartment overlooking the Pacific. The shelves were lined with textbooks and samples, but also relics she never spoke of. A rusted compass that no longer pointed north, a cracked brass key tagged hatch, and a single sealed tape labeled Morgan, Final Cut. She placed the tape in her old camera, the same one that had survived the flood. The screen flickered, and Morgan's face appeared, lit by lantern glow, eyes weary but steady. "Ellie," he said, voice soft, "if you see this, you made it. I told you once that the ocean keeps everything it takes. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's why I'm still down there, somewhere between waves and memory. Don't come back for me, but if it calls again, don't let it wake alone." The screen went black. Elise sat in silence for a long time, the sea murmuring outside her window. She remembered his last words on the island, his last look before the water took him. He had not been afraid, only resolved. Don't let it wake alone. She opened her laptop and began packing a new data set into encrypted files. Seismic readings, deep pressure logs, audio samples from submersible missions near the trench. She saw the same interference pattern repeating, faint but growing, like a heart learning to beat again. By midnight, her decision was made. 2 weeks later, aboard the research vessel Alethea, Elise stood at the stern as the sun bled into the horizon. The Pacific spread out in infinite calm, an ocean pretending to sleep. She adjusted the collar of her windbreaker and looked down at the sonar console beside her. The frequency spikes were unmistakable, steady, rhythmic, and intelligent. The ship's captain, a woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical tone, approached. "Dr. Mason, we've reached your coordinates. I still don't understand why we're here. There's no known anomaly, no wreck, no geological event. Just empty trench." "Not empty," Elise said quietly. "Just deep enough to remember." The captain frowned, but gave the order to deploy the submersible. The deck crew moved with practiced precision, lowering the sleek titanium vessel into the dark water. Elise climbed inside the narrow cockpit, securing her harness. "Depth clearance for 7 miles, the technician said over the radio. "After that, you're on your own." "Understood." The hatch sealed with a heavy sigh. The descent began. As the submersible dropped through layers of darkness, Elise felt the pressure build, not just outside, but within. The world narrowed to instrument lights and her heartbeat. Miles above, the ocean was calm. Down here, the water was alive. At 34,000 feet, her sonar display flared. The interference pattern returned, precise, deliberate. Then words, distorted but unmistakable, filtered through the audio feed. "Elise." Her chest tightened. "Morgan?" she whispered. A burst of static answered. Then faintly, "Not gone." Listening, the hull shuddered. Shadows moved in the floodlights, too large, too slow to be natural. A faint luminescence rippled along the trench wall, patterns pulsing like veins. The sonar screamed, overwhelmed by input. Then she saw it, a structure, metallic but grown, not built, embedded in the rock. It pulsed faint blue, echoing her sonar pings back in perfect synchronization. The readings spiked off the scale. Her voice trembled. Deep echo. It wasn't monitoring. It was communication. The console flickered. Her camera feed cut out, replaced by a looping message. Her own archived footage from the lighthouse, Morgan's voice whispering, "She's waking." The submersible lights dimmed. The ocean outside glowed brighter, like a sunrise from the abyss. A sound, not heard but felt, filled the cabin. It was vast, layered, familiar. She closed her eyes and understood it was not a call. It was a reply. When she opened them again, the instruments were dead. The sea beyond was still black, endless. But in the distance, through the porthole, she saw movement. A slow, rising column, immense, graceful. It was not a creature as she understood life, but a pattern, a geometry of sound and form. It watched her, or remembered her. "Hello," she whispered. The sonar clicked once, like a heartbeat. Then another. Then silence, she understood. It wasn't reaching for her. It was waiting. Elise flipped the manual recording switch. To anyone who finds this, the signal never died. It adapted. It's part of the ocean now. If you listen long enough, it will learn your name. The lights flared again. The pressure outside began to climb, alarms shrieking. The structure below started to fold inward, imploding gently, like a flower closing for night. Elise smiled through tears. "I hear you," she whispered, "and I'm not afraid." The submersible rose, carried by a current that didn't exist on any chart. She caught one last glimpse of the deep glow fading beneath her, the pulse of an ancient thing that had gone back to sleep. For now. Days later, the Alethea crew recovered the sub, adrift but intact. The cockpit was empty. Only the data recorder remained, still running. Inside the final transmission, time-stamped minutes before the feed ended, was one sound, faint but clear. 3 tones. Low, high, then a voice barely audible through the static, not goodbye. just deeper, and somewhere far below, the sea began to hum again. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.